Ahead and see if we do a roll call and see if we can have a quorum. At 8:30, we'll call the meeting to order.
Absolutely. President Broussard.
Here.
Vice President Cavello.
Here.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Here.
Commissioner Bull.
Present.
Commissioner Schiffer. Believe he told me he might be a few minutes late.
Okay.
Commissioner Rithaller.
Here.
Commissioner Cura.
Here.
Commissioner Francisco is absent. Commissioner Wildcat. And she is here too. I'm going to move her over as well. President Broussard, we have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we will move right along. Nick, do you have some things you need to do before the welcome?
President Broussard, I can go through the welcome real quick.
Okay.
Welcome to the December 23rd, 2024 special meeting of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. The primary mission of the Wyoming Gaming Commission is the protection of the wagering public and the health, safety, and welfare of the participants in all lawful gaming and parimutuel activities. Individuals who wish to address the commission will be recognized and called on by the president to speak. After the president has recognized you, please clearly state your name and the name of the organization you represent prior to addressing the commission. All comments, questions, and responses must flow through the president by addressing the president each time you wish to speak. This procedure ensures an orderly flow of discussion during the commission meeting. All meetings of the governing body of the agency are public meetings open to the public, except as otherwise provided pursuant to Wyoming Statute 164403A. This meeting is being held via Zoom and available to watch via video streaming on the Gaming Commission YouTube channel. The commission may open an executive session pursuant to Wyoming Statute 164405A. Inclusion on the agenda does not necessarily constitute a commission action.
Thank you. If you guys want to join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll get going. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So at this moment, we'll move to item 2 on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. We'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I would move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Cactus. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. President,
Yep.
my apologies. I think we did need to, I think Nick was going to have us add or amend the agenda to add to item 3B.
3B?
Yeah,
I have
it
it.
was-
That
I
is
have
correct.
a 3B. I have
Item
it.
number 3B
Yeah.
is a request for an appeal from Mrs. Lori Mosman for making fame. That should also include Mississippi Queen. So it's
Okay.
making fame and Mississippi Queen.
Is that the only change to the agenda?
President Broussard, that is the only change.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we're discussing it. We've made a change. Anyone who's made the motion or the second need to amend their motion or as presented new?
I'll be happy to amend my motion to include
The
the
changes?
change.
Okay, thank you. I think we had Torgerson as a second. That's my guess.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion regarding the agenda? Not seeing any, we'll call the vote. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
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 If there's anyone opposed, say no. Right, perfect. Moving on to item 3A, a request for an appeal from Michael Clark.
President Broussard, item number 3A is a request for an appeal from Michael Clark on Wilma's Dynasty. docket number 240168. If anybody who plans on testifying for this agenda item could raise their hand so I can get you moved over to the correct place.
Doing this where I know.
Mr. Michael Clark, are you present in the meeting? Mr. President, I don't see Mr. Clark here in the meeting. I'm going to try to see if
Is there any hands, Nick?
I don't have any hands for this agenda item at all. Oh, I just got one hand here. It's Mrs. Mosman. Let me get her moved over here.
She's item B, right? I mean,
She is, Mr. President, and she is a kind of the caregiver for these first three agenda items.
okay.
These horses are all really on her land here. I'm going to move her over so she can be a part of this here. All right, Mr. President, Mrs. Mosman is here as well now.
All right, Michael, give us some guidance. Do we just, do we make a motion first or we listen to her testimony at this point?
Mr. President, Ms. Mosman, are you going to testify on behalf of Mr. Clark's Wilma's Dynasty?
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing we would have to do, Mr. President, is swear Mrs. Mosman in, as well as the commission staff that plan on testifying in this matter.
Okay, let's do that.
So it would be Mrs. Mosman and Senior Inspection Specialist Warney.
Okay. Are those, I don't see anyone, but I'm guessing they're raising their hand. And
Mr. Warney is, yes.
Okay. All right. Are we doing this separately or all together?
Mr. President, you can do it all together.
Okay. And am I supposed to read something?
Would you like me to do it for you?
Yeah, go ahead, because I don't have it.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the commission, so help you God?
Yes. I do.
Thank you. Mr. President, I will turn this over to Mr. Brian Marvel, the Senior Assistant Attorney General.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. Brian Marvel, as the prosecuting attorney for the Wyoming Gaming Commission. As indicated before, I have Mr. Warney here to testify in regards to this matter. I will not be making any opening remarks or having any opening statement. If it would please the commission and yourself, Mr. President, we'll just hop in with having Mr. Warney testify as to the facts of the matter in this case. May I proceed, Mr. President?
Please do.
Thank you. Mr. Warney, could you, just for the record, please go ahead and state your name?
My name is Trey Warney.
And what is your current position with the Wyoming Gaming Commission?
I'm currently employed as a senior inspection specialist with the Wyoming Gaming Commission.
And can you describe for the commission, you have a report that has been submitted in reference to Wilma's Dynasty, is that correct?
That's correct.
And if you would briefly describe what occurred on October 22nd, 2024 for the inspection for Wilma's Dynasty, please.
On October 22nd, 2024, at about noon, Wilma's Dynasty domicile address was 388 Palomino in Bear River, Wyoming. I went to 388 Palomino and Wilma's Dynasty was not at the domicile address.
Were you able to locate Wilma's Dynasty at that particular time?
No, not at that particular time and not at that address.
And did you have any subsequent information to the location of Wilma's Dynasty?
Yes, Wilma's Special Agent Hotard went to 313 Almy Road and located Wilma's Dynasty at that address.
And so just to make sure that we're clear on the record and that the commission is clear on this, Wilma's Dynasty was not at the location at which the horse was supposed to be, correct?
Wilma's Dynasty was not at the domicile address of 388 Palomino.
And subsequent to that, you had issued a notice of status of change Wyoming breed program. Are you familiar with that document? Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And what was it that you took, or what action did you take in regards to Wilma's Dynasty?
Wilma's Dynasty was suspended.
And in looking at this document that I'm going to show this to you, this is the document that you generated in reference to the suspension, correct?
Yes.
And just for a matter of clarification, on the Wyoming bred horse, it says Williams Dynasty, but it should be Wilma's Dynasty. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was a typographical error.
Okay, thank you. And forgive me procedurally, Mr. President and members of the commission, since both of these documents are in fact have been included with there just as a matter of record and to ensure that I'm doing my job properly, I would move for both of these to be admitted as exhibits before the commission.
Sure.
And so in relationship to that, as the commission is very well aware, the commission has jurisdiction in this case pursuant to Wyoming Statute 1125-104E. And in relationship to that, as the commission again is well aware, the Chapter 8, Section 6 requires that a mare owner certify the location where the mare is physically located and where the mare is going to foal, if different from a certified location. And as you've heard Mr. Warney testify here today, that was not in fact the case, and that was the reason for issuing the suspension. And forgive me for the brief and short, but from my perspective, this is a fairly straightforward matter. And so outside of any questions that Ms. Morsman may have or that the commission may have, that's what we have presented, at least in relationship to docket number 240168.
Thank you. Ms. Moosman, do you have some testimony to present?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I did notify the your office and ask for a list. I was sent a list with no attachment. I called again on a Friday and asked for the attachment. Your secretary was not in, and they told me they would have her call me Monday. I never did receive a call. Your officers did tell me that I needed to change my domicile address. Last year when I was foaling them 4 mares out, I have never had to change the domicile address. They told me, if this is where we're going to locate them, this is where they have to be domiciled. But that's not where they are. They are at my field always. I take them up there. They're there for maybe 3 or 4 days. And I told that guy, I don't think that this is right, that I have to change their permanent address because this is not where they are. They're only here for 4 or 5 days to foal. Their domicile place is that field, that 313 Almy Road. But they told me if this is where they are to be located, that's where I have to put down. But as you see in your contracts that we fill out, they can leave at any time, but it asks you if it's a new address. And I always put no, because that's not their domiciled address. Their domiciled address is 313 Almy Road. But he told me, if this is where we're gonna find them, this is what I have to change. And as I say, I move them from my field to that address, and I've never had to change that. And so there's a discrepancy between where I really have to put their permanent domicile place, because I've never had to change that. But those four, they told me I needed to change it because that's where they needed to find them. But what's the difference between them being at my field, or if I have to move them to the vet clinic? The vet clinic isn't their permanent domicile place. So there's a little discrepancy there, but I did call your office twice. Your office sent me an email saying, here's your list, and there was no attachment. And you can ask Brandy, she'll verify that she did not send the attachment. Had I received that attachment, I would have noticed that they weren't on that list. So I feel that your office failed me as much as I failed, and I don't feel like I needed to even change their permanent domicile place from the time that they were there. So I asked you to take a look at that. I do know that there was other mayors that you allowed that had the same problem, and you allowed it last year. So I'm just going to ask for you to take a look at that offer.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
oh, I apologize, Mr. President. I do have in relationship, or excuse me, Mr. President, if I may, I apologize.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, as indicated, Mr. Warney was the one who did conduct the inspection. As the commission and Mr. President will note, Mr. Hotard is here as well. And I do think there is I'll put it this way, I think there's a dispute or a little distinction from that conversation. Although Mr. Hotard was not sworn in, if we could have him sworn in, and he can discuss what the actual conversation that he had in relationship to what Ms. Moosman was addressing, if it would please Mr. President and the Commission.
Yes, please, let's swear in Inspector Hotard, please. Nick, can you do that?
Mr. President, I can. Mr. Hotard, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the commission? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Agent Hotard is now sworn in.
All right, thank you. Do we have questions, commissioners, for the inspector? Or Inspector, do you have some testimony you want to present on your own?
Yes, Mr. President, again, Brian Marvel, if I may just ask Agent Hotard a few questions, if it would please yourself and the commission.
Of course, please go ahead.
Thank you. Agent Hotard, you heard Ms. Moosman's description of conversations that you had with her. Would you describe the conversations and what occurred as you recall it?
So I checked the horses at 313 Almy. Inspector Warney had checked the horses at the what was the other address? 380 Palomino. So the conversation Ms. Moosman and I had was that, and I guess I can back up a little bit from that last year. So I guess it would have been 23, the fall of 23. Special Agent Shane Rinker and I were checking horses at that address, and several of them had been moved to the Palomino address. We told Ms. Moosman that when those horses changed addresses, that there needed to be a movement order put in, and we basically gave her warning, and we didn't suspend the horses. Ms. Moosman, so now we'll move forward to the conversation that I had with Ms. Moosman at 313 Almy. Her assertion was that what she told me was she would routinely move the horses from the Almy address to the Palomino addresses after the mayor's fold. And a lot of that was because of there just wasn't barn space. Sometimes I think the creek, there's a small creek that goes through there and it would be too high. She would move them after they were big enough to travel. Then she would take them back to Utah. And then from Utah, come back to the mayor's back to the 313 Almy address. So they're moving several times. I told her I would look into it to see what, if the mistake was ours or hers on the movement. And I couldn't find an issue from our end. Did that answer?
It does. And that's the only questions I have, excuse me, for Agent Hotard. I just wanted to address that conversation and provide a little background for the commission and yourself, Mr. President.
Thank you. Commissioners, does anyone have a question for either our prosecutor or Ms. Mooseman?
Your Honor,
Yes, so, yes, sir. Commissioner Bull.
Commissioner Mr. Dennis Bull. Mr. Hotard, is it Hotard? Do I have that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, when I read the report, it indicates to me that there was a discussion with Mrs. Mosman, not this year, but also the previous year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in that case, you also found the horses at the Almy Road location. Is that correct?
No, sir. The horses were supposed to be at the Almy Road address, and they were actually at the Appaloosa address.
Okay.
Or Palomino address.
Okay, so you found them at the Appaloosa address or the Palomino Drive address is what I mean.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. She either has the horses on Almy Road or she has them at Palomino Drive. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so that time you found them in Palomino Drive. Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, and so this is when you had a discussion with her. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. The Special Agent Rinker and I discussed that with her at that time.
Okay, and so that discussion was, you've got to have a domicile address for these horses. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you tell her was the proper address to domicile the horses at that time? Or did you tell her?
We had to have an indication that we had to know where the horses were at. So if they were listed as being at 313 Almy, then that's where they had to be when we showed up to check them. If they were going to be at the 388 Palomino, then that needed to get changed so that would be their new domicile address. And there was, by our rules, that has to occur within 24 hours. So we gave her a warning.
Did you indicate to her that the proper domicile address was the Palomino Drive location at that time?
The address we were showing was the Almy address, not the Palomino address. And the horses were actually at the Palomino address, but our record showed they were supposed to be at Almy. Did that answer your question, Commissioner?
No, not really. So, obviously she was, I don't want to use the word confused, but she was uncertain as to where she should domicile those horses back in 2024 when you talked with her. And I just wondered if the two of you resolved that dilemma at that time. Where is the proper place? Where's the correct domicile address? Did you do that or did you not do that? Was she left trying to figure it out on her own? Is that what happened?
When we go to the field, Commissioner, when we go to the field to check horses, we have the address.
What happened?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the.
Did you leave it up to her to figure it out where to domicile those horses? And I'm talking about the first discussion that we talked about.
We issued a warning and told her that she needed to get the proper address listed with us as far as where the horses were at.
And you didn't indicate to her what you thought that might be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So a year later, you went to the Palomino Drive address and the horses weren't there, correct?
I didn't go there, Mr. Commissioner. That was Senior Inspector Warney.
Okay, that's right. It was the other inspector who did that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hotard. And so, Mr. Warney, you went to the next address and didn't find, you went to the Palomino address and didn't find them. Is that
That's
correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
But you found the horses at the Almy Road address fairly easily. Is that correct?
Special Agent Hotard found the horses at the Almy Road address.
Yeah,
That's
and the
correct.
reason you did that is you knew that that's where they would be because of your previous conversations with Miss Mosman. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct, Commissioner. I didn't have any previous conversations with Miss Mosman. But Hotard was at the Almy address checking other horses, and he found Miss Mosman's horses at the Almy address.
And that was something that was quite knowable given the history of this case. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. To Special Agent Hotard.
Okay. So, Mr. Warney, did you have a discussion with Ms. Mosman about what should be the proper domicile for these horses?
No, I did not.
If I was to ask you two gentlemen today, what's the proper address for domiciling these horses, what would you tell me?
Commissioner, the domicile address that we had on file in our paperwork should be.
That's not what I'm asking. Is what should be, based on your knowledge of the facts, where she puts these horses, how she handles these horses, what's the proper domicile address for these horses? You guys are the experts. I want to know that.
Commissioner Volt, my answer would be that she moves them from 313 Almy to the 388 Palomino. So wherever she's moving those horses, then she needs to notify the commission within 24 hours of that. It would either be the 388 Palomino or the 313 Almy, depending on where the horses are at. If they're at 313 Almy, then that's the domicile address. If they're at 388 Palomino, that's the domicile address. She keeps them at one place until they foal. She moves them to the other address after they foal, and then back to Utah after that.
Okay, so even if she moves them to full, she has to designate a new domicile address. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir. That's what the rules say.
Okay.
Read your paperwork. It doesn't.
Mrs. Musman, I'll give you a chance to talk here in a minute. I'm just trying to get an understanding of the state's position, okay?
Okay.
But we'll give you a chance to, if the chairman lets me, so forth. So when Mrs. Mosman tells the commission that she tried to comply but was uncertain about how to comply, do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. President, those are the only questions I have for the staff right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Ball. Do we have other commissioners with questions?
President,
see.
sorry, Commissioner Torgerson has his hand up.
Commissioner Torgerson, you go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess my question could be addressed either to the staff or to Ms. Musman. Is geographically speaking, how far apart are these properties? How long had the mares been moved when the inspector showed up? And, what are the facilities differences? It sounds like one of the properties is just a pasture area. Is the other area barn or veterinary facility? I'm just trying to, in my mind, see how far these horses are being moved and the frequency.
Thank you. Ms. Moosman, can you answer that question? How far the two properties are from each other?
Yes, I can. They are approximately, I would guess, 3.5 miles away from each other.
Okay.
Can I speak for a moment?
Can you answer the other question quickly? Do you know how long were your horses at the unlisted location?
Those mares were brought up the night before your associates come. I had put in a paper on Mississippi Queen and Macon Fame. I'd move them up, and then in the night before your inspectors came at like 8:30 at night, I was at my field feeding, and Wilma's Dynasty and Eyes of Delight were bagged up and ready to foal. And my crick had started to rise, and if they had foaled before I got them across the creek, I couldn't get a baby across that creek. I moved them at 8:30 at night. That's where the issue started. Is I moved them that night at 8:30. I did not have their registration numbers with me in my truck when I moved them. I was doing paperwork. Your inspector came at 7:30 the next morning. I was in my house doing paperwork when I got the call, and I told them I had to move them because the creek was rising. I was afraid they were going to fold, and they fold the next night. I had to move them mares because if they fold, I couldn't get a baby across the creek because the creek had rose. So I moved them late that night, and my lady that folds them out, I fold them out at the Palomino Drive. That's what I do. I move them up, and I always notify you guys that I've moved them up to Palomino Drive. And your paper says on it, it asks you if it's a new domicile address. And what's the difference between them folding it at an address and them going to a vet clinic if I have a sick baby? We're going to say no all the time. And that's where I'm confused is your people told me I needed to change their permanent address, but they're only there for 3 or 4 days. The minute they fall, 2 days later, I take them out of there. So they're only there 3 or 4 days. I watch them really close. I don't take them up until I think they're ready to fall. And so I move them mares from my Almy Road to the Palomino Drive. I have a lady that folds them out for me there. So I just move them right before they fall, like hopefully 3 or 4 days. I watch them very close. I move them up to Palomino, they fall, and then I put in my paperwork, they're moving back to Utah when I come bring them back to breed. Well, Utah's not a permanent domicile place because we're not in Wyoming anymore. So that's where I'm confused. I've never had to change their permanent domicile place until those four were there and we had this discussion. So what's proper? Is it proper that I have to change every one when I take them up there to foal? They're 3.5 miles away from each pasture or each place. So I am confused. I am confused. I need to know. I am trying to do things right. I'm not, it's not like they weren't in Wyoming. They were in Wyoming. The question is, what's the proper domicile place?
Well,
I assume it's
can I
where
answer,
it's
can I
at.
answer that for you just as quickly and as succinctly as I can? What needs to be listed as the domicile is where the inspectors are to find it. That's really, and if it's in a place where they can't find it, then, and if everybody did that, then our inspectors would just be running around the state all. So let me ask Director Laramundi a question. Do we have an expedited system where in a situation like this, where they can alert our staff as a change in domicile, like through a text or through an email or something along those ways?
President Broussard, so our website, we have a transport notification form that they fill out. Once they click submit, it immediately comes to our office. And if I may, just a little bit of history on this. There's a lot of confusion and the word domicile keeps being brought up. We aren't looking for a domicile address anymore. 2 years ago, the rules were changed from a domicile address to where the horse is physically located. So if the horse is moving from one location to another, by rule, they are required to notify the commission 24 hours prior to that movement. And the reason for that is so our inspectors in the field aren't chasing horses across the entire state.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have other questions for either the prosecutor or Ms. Moosman?
Your Honor,
Commissioner Bowl, go ahead.
Ms. Mosman, this is Commissioner Bowl. So you remember the first discussion, not this year, but the previous year that you had with the inspectors about the, see, I want to say domiciled address because that's what was used in the reports. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes.
And did you reach some sort of conclusion with that discussion as to how you should register the horses with the commission?
All I assumed is I changed those 4. I had already pulled out all the other mares. I had changed those 4 because they told me I needed to. But that's why
You changed which 4 horses are we talking about?
Eyes of Delight, Wilma's Dynasty, Macon Fame, and Mississippi Queen.
And you changed it from what to what?
From Almy Road, 313 Almy Road to 388 Palomino.
Okay. And the reason you did that is?
They told me that I needed to change their address, and that's my question. Your forms asked you, is this a new permanent domicile address? Well, realistically, it's not because they're only there long enough to foal. Their permanent place is Almy. So it's a little confusing. That's what I'm saying. If you take it to a vet clinic, that's not going to be their permanent domicile place anymore. That's what I'm asking. What do we do?
Okay, so now I want you to go to the discussion that took place this year, okay?
Okay.
All right, so then did you come away with an understanding of where you should register the horses after this discussion
Not
with the
really.
state?
No, I'm assuming they should. I guess if I move them up to full, I need to change their permanent domicile if they're only there for 5 days. And then when I bring them back in June, I need to change it back. Is that what we're assuming?
I'm going to let the staff explain that to you. Did anyone explain to you that all this stuff about domicile is really irrelevant? It's just where your horses are physically present?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you look at your form, I just took one to the vet. Your form asked you. I had a mare just get cut just 3-4 days ago. I had to take her to the vet. I notified your office and said, I'm headed to the vet with this mare. She's not going to be at her domicile place. So what would I tell you then? Okay, I'm taking her to the vet. Then I put in another paper that she had to go to a larger vet clinic in Utah to be looked at. And then I just sent another paper when I brought her back to Wyoming saying now she's back at Palomino. So what will be her permanent domicile place these last 4 days? She's been to 3 different facilities. That's what I'm asking. What would be her permanent place too? That's the problem we have is your forms are kind of wide open because they do ask you when you move them and they ask you where they're at. Well, if they're going to a vet clinic, that's not really their permanent domicile place because we're moving them for medical reasons.
I understand. You don't need to tell me that again. I get it. Is it correct that our forms still speak to domicile address?
President Broussard, Commissioner Bull. So some of our forms it has taken a little bit of time for them to get caught up with some of the rule changes. And when these things have been brought up, we've been making adjustments to these forms. However, when these rules were promulgated, we have sent numerous notices out to all of the horsemen about these rule changes, going from the domicile address to the physical location, and the requirements to notify the commission 24 hours prior to the movement. And to answer Mrs. Mosman's question, that is correct. Anytime you move a horse, you have to notify this office pursuant to the rules. If you're moving it from one address to the next, if it's for, 5 days, you put in that movement notice. And then when you move it back from that one to another one, you put that one back in. And that is, so the Wyoming bred program and the registrar always knows where these horses are at. As this is a $7 million a year program.
Yeah, Nick, but sounds to me like you're saying that some of our forms still use the term domicile address. Is that correct?
I think, at the time, this one might have said that. I'm looking at the form that is on the website right now, and it talks about leaving a certified location. It does ask the question if it is a new permanent location. And the reason for that question is in the Wyoming bred program, when Ms. Koltiska puts it in, if it's a transported horse from one location to another, there's a box that she checks that just shows that it's a temporary movement. If it's a permanent movement, she has to change it in another spot on the system to show that address as the permanent address that it's going to be at. So when we build the forms to do the inspections, there's actually a box that shows if a horse is transported out of a location. So when the guys or gals go out into the field to find that horse, if that box is checked, they will know that that horse is not going to be there.
Thank you.
So, Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. And I believe that there is, and I'll just, part of, I believe, what the executive director was discussing, and I'm holding this up. I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but there's a photograph of the horse, Wyoming Gaming Commission, and highlighted, and there's that box up at the top that says transport. I believe that's what the executive director is referring to in relationship to that. I just want to highlight that that is included in your packet as it relates to these horses that we're discussing here today, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I and I apologize, if I may at some point just ask Ms. Moosman a couple of questions, I would appreciate it.
Please continue.
Ms. Moosman, you were a participant in this program, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as you would agree with me that as part of a participant in this program, it would behoove you and it'd be in your best interest to become familiar with the rules and regulations for which you are to comply with. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that it's not the state or the inspector's responsibility to provide you either legal advice or guidance in that regard. Would you agree with me on that statement?
That's correct. But I do feel like you need to be a little, maybe my case is a little different. Most horses stay at the same facility all the time. I understand that. I think we need to know for sure where permanent domicile, where that's supposed to be when we're moving them. That needs to be, and then again, I did call your office and I asked for a list so that this wouldn't happen, and I did not receive the list. I made 2 calls to your office and your office failed to give me that list. So I did not completely neglect this. I tried to make sure this was all right.
Can you clarify? Well, I'm sorry, can you clarify what you mean by the list? Is that the list of your horses and where they're at?
Yes. Just so that we wouldn't have any issues. I did call your office and I did, Brandy did send me a list, but there was no attachment to the list that named the horses because I have 2 facilities. And I did ask for a list at the Almy Road. So just so that I knew that everything was correct before the inspection ever started. There was no attachment to the list. I did call twice.
Yes, thank you. We got it. So prosecutors, if you guys want to continue your questioning.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Mooseman, but you are aware that wherever the horses are located, correct, that you have an obligation to ensure that, to notify through the proper forms, either online or submitting that, you're aware of that obligation, correct?
Yes, and I do that. I do that. You can check with your offices. I do a lot of the forms. I do. I have even called when I've had an emergency situation. I had to take Mississippi Queen to the vet, and I did not know I was leaving with her till the vet till I got to her. The minute I loaded her in the trailer, before I ever left my facility, I called and said, I am on my way to the veterinarian. I can't fill out a form now because I'm driving because my baby is trying to die. I mean, I've done all I can to keep up with your information. I'm not trying to cheat the system. The mares are in Wyoming and you have located them. It's just, we need to know on the paperwork where, if I move them every time, that's fine. I can do the paperwork. And if I need to change that, I will. But my question is, for sure, where do we want the domicile? If I have to change it every time I move them, I'm good with that. Just be firm with what the rules say, because it's kind of open. It says, it asks you, is this a new place? Well, if they're there for 3 days, is it really a new place or not?
Well, you'd agree with me, Ms. Mooseman, that if you move them from where, so let's say, just for an example, if they're listed at 380 Palomino Drive and you move them from that address to 313 Almy, you would agree with me that and I guess we can get technical, but that's a different place, whether you want to use different or new from where they were originally located at 388 Palomino Drive. Would you agree with that statement?
Correct. Yes.
And would you agree with me that at least on October 22nd, 2024, Wilma's Dynasty was not at 388 Palomino Drive?
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. I know Commissioner Ridholler had a question. If you want to go ahead with that. Ruben, do you still have a question? You're on mute, I think.
Can you hear me now, Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Rittaller. I guess when we talk about vet moves, babies getting cut in fences and that, I think there is a place, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have an emergency move such as that, then it's a 48-hour afterwards you have to notify. Am I correct with that one?
President Broussard, in case of an emergency movement, it actually just says as soon as possible. So there's no limit. And the phone calls that we have received for those kind of emergency movements, that satisfies the rule. We make notes in those files so to notate that those horses are not at that address and they're at a vet or wherever the case may be.
I just wanted to clarify there was a difference between emergency moves and just regular moves. And I don't know if way I'm hearing it, if it's where the mare was located for foaling wasn't the ideal spot. I don't know if that qualifies for an emergency move or what, you know what I mean? Because that was, they said 8:30 in the evening, inspected at 7:30 in the morning. That was my question.
President Broussard, Commissioner Ridholler, the rule actually outlines what an emergency movement is. And it has to do with a medical emergency that is seen by a licensed veterinarian.
Okay. Commissioner Bowe, did I see your hand go up for a sec or no?
Your Honor, I just have this question for maybe Nick or somebody. What's the fiscal impact upon somebody like Mr. Clark if the suspension is upheld? What kind of money are we talking about?
President Broussard, Commissioner Bowe, I'm not exactly sure if I can answer that. Give me a couple minutes though, and I'll try to find out what it would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, do you have a question while Nick is doing some numbers? Commissioner Schiffer, you're on mute, I believe.
Mr. President, if I may, I think there's some confusion in relationship to the foal and the creek and all of that. My understanding is, and Agent Hotard can testify to this, or as well as Agent Warney, but I believe that incident occurred. That incident happened in 2023. That is not what happened or what occurred on 2024. I just want to make sure for the record I get that clarification. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for that. Dan, are you off mute yet?
I think I'm off
Okay,
mute.
yeah.
Mr.
Okay.
President, I'd like to ask Ms. Moosman, you contacted Ms. Koltiska to find out what the records show where the location of your horses were, right?
Yes.
And when did that happen?
I'm gonna say that was the end of August. I just wanted to make sure everything was good if I was inspected. I
So
want
that was before
before.
Mr. Warney came to inspect the horses. You
Yes.
tried to find out what you had listed
Right,
as
correct.
the address for the horses. Is that correct?
Correct, correct.
Okay, thank you. And you did never get a
No,
response that satisfied that request. Is that correct?
I did receive an email, but there was no attachment to the email.
And the attachment you were expecting would say
Yes.
the names of the horses and their location. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
President Broussard, Commissioner Bull. So it is very hard for us to come up with an actual figure on what that would be. It would all depend on, the way the rule is written now, they lose the current year through the next breeding season. So they would lose 2 foals, but not knowing if, the following year, if the mare ended up being open or if a foal was conceived, it would be really, really hard. And then it would also depend on when that foal would run and how many points that foal would earn prior to them being awarded breeder points for that. I don't know if we could really come up with an accurate number of what it would cost or what they would lose.
Thank you.
Mr. President, they would also have to re-register the mare at a penalty price, right?
President Broussard, Commissioner Schiffer, that is correct. To reaccredit it, it's $300 instead of the $200 accreditation fee.
But Nick, what kind of money are we talking about here? I mean, isn't there some way to put a number to it?
But how about let's ask Ms. Moosman, do you know about what you're for the one particular horse, what are you considering that you may be out?
Well, I can tell you Macon Fame was the dam of Papa Fame, and he won multiple fraternities and derbies, and he's probably made 30,000+ for me in points. So this is a big deal.
Okay. I guess I'm leaning towards, especially after you gave us that number. I mean, there is a responsibility, a huge responsibility to follow the rules in this situation. Is that clear?
That's clear.
Yeah. No. All right. Do we have any other questions? Is there any other points that need to be made by the prosecutors? Okay, so at this point, I guess we will entertain a motion to maintain the suspension, or what exact words do we need, Nick?
President Broussard, I believe you would be looking for a motion to uphold the suspension.
Okay,
And
I'll entertain.
for Wilma's dynasty.
Thank you. Do we have anybody who's willing to make a motion to uphold the suspension on Wilma's Dynasty?
Your Honor, for discussion purposes, I'd make a motion to affirm the suspension. of
Okay, do we have
Wilma's
a,
Dynasty.
thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Covello. Any further discussion regarding the motion?
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Covello.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but from my experience of what we've done in the past, these types of moves without being documented, basically are what give credence to the program. And a $7 million program, I think we need to have fairly strict rules. And I believe it may be a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, but it seems like it is with everyone that's involved. So unfortunately, in this case, I think we do need to uphold the suspension because I believe the rules have been followed. I'm sure it stings terribly, but this is where I stand.
Thank you, Commissioner Covello. How about Commissioner Torgensen? You have a comment?
Yes, Mr. President. I guess if I may, based off of the time that this mayor was moved and the fact that it was just the next morning when they were found, I don't know if I can make a motion to actually repeal the suspension.
Well, no, at this point, we're going to either have to vote it up or down.
Okay.
Okay, we have a hand from prosecutors.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to add to members of the commission, just this kind of point of view from a legal perspective. So at the end of the day, I might not be familiar with all the traffic laws that exist in our state or that exist in my particular county. However, as a license holder, as someone who goes out and engages in that, I am also held responsible to those standards, regardless of whether or not I have knowledge of that. And particularly in this case, while I understand and sympathize with Ms. Moosman's plight, at the end of the day, this is significant money. And we're talking about a situation where they can go online, they could submit a form, whether she received the list or not. If she's changing the location of the horses, that change needs to be indicated within the database for the Wyoming Gaming Commission. That is how the rules are written. And from my perspective, the legal perspective, the obligation is to follow the rule of law, follow that. And in no other context that I'm aware of in the legal context is ignorance or not knowing exactly what's going to happen a defense. And so I would just point that out to the commission at this point in time. And so thank you for allowing me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schiffer, you have a hand up.
Mr. President, what really troubles me here is that Ms. Moosman did make attempts to find out from the commission what had been listed as the location of this horse, and apparently there's some more horses we're going to talk about later, and those inquiries were not answered. And that, plus the fact that she was confused by the wording on the form, tends to me to be that we have to accept some responsibility for her not quite getting it correct. And I guess I'm leaning opposite of Commissioner Covello in this regard because of these facts. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Laramundi, are you familiar with any more of the details of when Ms. Moosman contacted Brandy or contacted our office, and what was the reason, what was requested, what was given, and why?
President Broussard, I can move Brandy over to speak to it. I do know that the original request was received on August 1st, but Brandy can speak to the details on that as well, and I will get her over here directly.
Basically just want to know what was requested, if there was confusion in what was requested, or if there was advice given to her that we haven't heard yet. That'd be great. Brandy, are you familiar with the question I just asked? I know you're muted right now.
And Mr. President,
Yes.
Hear me?
it might be a good idea, since we are taking testimony, to go ahead and swear Brandy in, since it's testimony relevant to the suspension.
Thank you, Michael. Nick, can you quickly swear Brandy in?
President Broussard, Ms. Koltiska, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the commission, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need us to repeat the question, Brandy?
No, President Broussard.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So regarding the request for the list, it was requested by Lori Mosman before August 1st of 2024 to supply a list of horses owned by her or Chris Nevaker. I responded, I created the list in Excel and responded to her on August 1st of 2024. In that, for some reason, and I pulled it up, it looks like the attachment did not go through on that. And I said, please find attached the list requested for broodmare registered through the Wyoming Bred Program as breeder stock for Mosman and Nevaker. Those were the horses that she asked for specifically. So I did send that. I do swear that came back to where once she said she hadn't received that a couple months ago, I looked and found that it was an attachment, but there was no response back letting me know that there was no attachment. Or I would have, responded with the actual attached list. And as far as not calling back, to my recollection, I call everybody back that calls this office. I've talked to them multiple times. So I don't believe that to be a true factor that I did not respond back.
Okay. Thank you. Commission legal staff, you have your hand up if one of y'all needs to comment.
I apologize, Mr. President. It was addressed. I was just going to request that the witness be sworn in, and so that was handled before. So again, apologies, but that's what it was in regard to.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, at this point, do we have more questions for anyone regarding this matter?
President Broussard, I also have a hand up in the public.
Okay, so we'll let Commissioner Kura ask his question, and then that'll be the second person, whoever that is.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Kotiska, do you talk to the owners basically, or is it the handlers, the trainers, and the caretakers of these horses when you get these requests?
President Broussard, Commissioner Kura, normally I talk to the caregivers. In this instance, Lori handles most of the movements. And like she said, she has done a lot of them, and we've worked well together regarding that aspect. The owners only, they send them to these people to take care of their horses, especially the out-of-state people. So when you have somebody housing out-of-state broodmares, I usually talk to the one kind of in charge of them, which in this case is Lori.
Okay, thank you. Is the owner Michael Clark, is he a non-resident then?
That's correct.
Where does he live?
I believe Utah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kura. The person who had their hand up, Nick, is that Billy?
Yes,
Okay.
sir, President Broussard.
All right, Billy.
How you doing?
Good, great.
Hey, so my question is to everyone there: these four horses that you're going to be dealing with are all basically the same case. So I am wondering if pleases the commission to consider these at once. Are we going to go through the same facts and discussions for each one, or are we basically going to get to the next one and say, okay, we're voting in the same narrative? Because if that's the case, I would just prefer to have my thoughts heard. Because I have a horse that's in consideration here as well.
Yeah. Are you Mr. Peterson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're gonna hear each case separately, just in case there's other circumstances.
Yeah, it seems to me that these are
We have a motion right now, just specifically uphold the suspension for this one horse.
my concern, President Broussard, is that each of these are going to be viewed in the same context. And if one is voted, the first one voted, then they're all going to be voted the same way. So if they're all going to be considered in their own separate situation, are new facts going to be considered?
Well, we will. At this point, we're gonna try to be as fair as possible, to each. I mean, I think we're being as transparent and as fair as we
Yeah,
can.
I understand. I agree with you.
Yeah, we're not gonna make a judgment about a horse that's down the road until we hear the facts of that case. At least I'm fairly certain.
They're all pretty much the same situation where they go from the pasture to the foaling shed and back, which is what we're all dealing with here, all four of us.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Dan, did you have a comment? Commissioner Schiffer, did you want to make a comment?
No, I just, Ms. Moosman, it's your testimony that you followed up and tried to contact Ms. Koltiska after you did not receive the attachment. Is that correct?
That's correct. I called on a Friday and the gal that answered my call said that they were in Rock Springs and they would have her call me on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, Brandy, do you have any insight for us on the process of the failure, if there was one?
President Bouchard, not that I can say. I mean, I return all my phone calls that I receive. I don't pick and choose. If somebody calls this office, it is protocol for me to call them back. I do know, I mean, as of August 1st, I wouldn't have been in Rock Springs. That was the last weekend of Wyoming Downs. So I'm not quite sure, you know, what happened there, but like I said, it's protocol for me to return all the calls that I receive.
Okay,
And
thank you.
that's all I can testify to.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Any questions for the folks now, the horse in front of us? All right, if not hearing any, I think we'll do a roll call vote. Nick, would you like to go? And a yes would be to uphold the suspension.
President Broussard,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Vice President Cavello,
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson,
No.
Commissioner Bull,
No.
Commissioner Schiffer,
No.
Commissioner Ritholler,
Yes.
Commissioner Kura,
Yes.
Commissioner Wildcat,
Yes.
President Broussard, that is 5 yeses and 3 nos.
Okay, so the suspension is upheld. We will now move to item 3B, please. The commission staff, will they want to open with some comments? Is that? Well, we'll start.
President Broussard, item number 3B is the amended request from Mrs. Mosman to appeal the decision of suspension for Macon Fame and Mississippi Queen. That docket number is 240168. The members of the commission, and I would assume Ms. Mosman will testify to these ones as well. They're still sworn in, and I would just remind them of that. And I would turn this over to Mr. Marvel as well.
Marvel, if you'd like to make some opening comments, you
Uh,
have the.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. More to the gentleman's previous point, as a matter here, because in relationship to this, Agent Warney was involved with these two horses as well. The report and the suspension, while the letter suspended is different, the report is the same. So what I would, in the interest of time and in order to avoid duplication of testimony that's already been presented, if it pleases Mr. President and the commission, just stipulate that the two witnesses that have already testified, their testimony will be in accordance with that in relationship to Macon Fame, as well as Mississippi Queen, that they were not at that location at 388 Palomino Drive. From there, their testimony would be essentially identical, and so therefore we'd stipulate to that. I certainly can ask questions, but I think given the fact that the testimony has already been elicited, reserving any, obviously, if there's new evidence or any additional questions that the commission members may have for these witnesses, that would be my preference. But obviously, I leave that to you, Mr. President, as well as the members of the commission.
Thank you. So I guess at this point, we'll entertain a motion to uphold the suspension for item B3, Macon Fame. I have a motion to uphold the suspension.
Mr. President, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Cavello. Do I have a second?
Mr. President, I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Ritholler. So at this point, we'll open it up for additional questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Bowe, go ahead.
I don't have any questions. I'm going to vote against the motion. Ms. Mosman, the thing you need to understand is I want you to forget the word domicile. It sounds like what counts is the physical presence of those horses. That's what counts. So don't think about domicile. Don't think about permanent locations. It's your responsibility to notify the commission where the physical presence of the horses are. And I understand your confusion because reading the reports and stuff like that, I was confused. Of course, I confuse easily. I'm going to vote against this motion because I think the confusion at least partly rests with the commission and the commission's staff and the commission rules and so forth. But it sounds like I'm on the losing end of that vote, which is how it goes. But that's the lesson you need to take from this is discard the word domicile, focus on physical presence of those horses. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
I'm freezing up a bit, so if I completely drop off, Vice President Cavello, you'll have to take over. But anyone else freezing up? Just Wapiti, Wyoming. Okay. I'd like to add to what Commissioner Bowe said quickly, and that is we definitely feel that this is a painful process for you guys. At the end of the day, you have to understand that the whole point of it is so trying to figure out domicile or whatever. You have to understand that at any given moment, our inspectors have to find the horse. And if you help us do that, then there'll be no problems. And that's kind of cut and dry to me. So I'm sorry. Any other comments before we go forward? All right. So if not, Nick, would you call the vote?
President Broussard,
Yes.
Vice President Cavello,
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson,
No.
Commissioner Bowe,
No,
Commissioner Schiffer,
No.
Commissioner Ritholler,
Yes.
Commissioner Kura,
Yes.
Commissioner Francisco is absent, and Commissioner Wildcat had to bow out. She had another engagement. So that makes it 4 yeses and 3 nos, President Broussard.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, we will move on to item 3C.
President Broussard, item 3C. Let me get to my paper here. Item 3C is a request for an appeal from Mr. Billy Peterson for the Wyoming Broodmare Isa Delight, docket number 240168. Mr. Senior Inspection Specialist Warney will be the one for the staff testifying to that one. I'm not sure if Mrs. Mosman will, and Mr. Peterson was on. He would have to be sworn in though.
Thank you. Let's swear him in. So,
Mr. Peterson, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the commission, so help you God?
I do.
Then you
Thank you.
say-
Thank you.
Put Tracy's.
okay, is there any new information different? If the commission legal staff have comments or questions, please start with those.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. No, again, because this Isa Delight is also part of this report from Agent Warney. Again, the testimony will be the same, so we'll stipulate to the fact that the testimony would be the same, with the exception that Isa Delight was not at the 388 Palomino Drive, which is consistent with the previous testimony. Again, so we will just stipulate to that there won't be any different testimony for the commission to hear. Again, just reserving any opportunity that we may have to address any new evidence or new testimony. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything additional to add?
Well, it's interesting to me to watch this unfold. It almost feels like the gaming commission has an interest in taking these horses out of the program, and I'm not sure what benefit they have from doing so. I've been in horse racing my entire life. Okay, many of you may know who I am. I also serve on the Utah Racing Commission, so I understand the position that you're in and trying to do the right thing with upholding the rules. However, I ask the commission to consider what the rules were in place for. The rules were written to make sure mares were in the state of Wyoming from the date of August 15th through foaling. Now, these other tertiary rules were written just for the inspectors to be able to find the mares, which I understand it's convenient and helps them to mark off so we can eliminate the cheaters and the frauds. However, that was in no way, shape, or form what happened here. And this all could have been avoided had your inspectors communicated with one another and said, oh, you know what? They have 2 locations right here because they have to go from a pasture over to a foaling barn, which is 3 miles away. These people have done nothing to break the rule, so to speak, the rule of what we're trying to protect against, which is keep these horses in Wyoming to protect the economic interests of Wyoming. So the commissioners, I ask you to consider the common sense reality of the situation. I mean, yeah, you can go to the letter of the law all day long, but what did you do there? So many things were dropped, so many balls were dropped in these situations, from the inspector coming in and saying, oh, you have to change the permanent domicile, so we have to change the form. But your form is not conducive to helping people understand what you're trying to do in the first place. If they go to a vet clinic, you don't have to change the permanent domicile. And now I understand you've changed the forms. So now, yeah, there is a new box, there's new wording, there's new rules. And we can go back and look at multiple situations where other people in your state have moved horses around and then moved them back. But just for that situation, they weren't, let's say, caught, or they weren't found. They went from a vet clinic back to their barn, or they went to a different pasture and then back. So did these mares leave the state of Wyoming? No. They were there the whole time. So what do you benefit from removing these mares? How do you all benefit? What is the point? Are you just making a point? Or are you considering the common sense reality of the situation? That's what I'm asking you to do. This is not hard. To me, this is not hard at all. This shouldn't have even been brought before the commission, waste everybody's time. Your investigators should have said, you know what, they weren't at this address, but because I told her to change the address last year when they were over there foaling. End of story. They're back in the pasture now. You don't have a, you don't, this is not confusing, guys. You're making it way harder than it really is. It's one location, it's the other. And I'm not sure why you can't see that. That's the frustrating part. Now, yeah, you can get the lawyer speak out and you get the legal language out, but really, did that help us in this situation at all? We're trying to promote horse racing in the state of Wyoming. And what I've heard today is the ones who are voting in favor of this proposal are not. They're not helping to protect that interest. So I'm trying to promote horse racing. I'm trying to promote horse racing in Wyoming and be a part of that program. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to do it the wrong way or illegally or slide mares in there when they shouldn't have been. They've been there the whole time, guys, for 2 straight years. And now you're telling me I can't be in there for 2+ years. And I'll pass the time back to you for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Do we have any? Yeah, Commissioner Cavello.
Thank you, President Broussard. I guess I'd like to address Mr. Peterson at this point. I'm one of the guys that have voted to uphold the motions and the suspensions from the commission staff. Certainly not in any way feeling good about that. Hate to see that happen to anyone. However, I guess I'm kind of, from my perspective, Mr. Peterson, upholding what's been done in the past and the fact that when this particular situation has come up in the past, this is the way the vote has gone. And basically to try to uphold, I guess, the system itself and how well it works, and certainly have no joy in the fact that some horses are taken out of the program, but feel that this is what's been done in the past and maybe needs to change. But just wanted to put that out there, that certainly have no, I guess, nothing against any of these horse owners, and certainly am very interested in seeing that the racing program in the horse industry in the state of Wyoming continues to flourish. So not something that we get great pleasure out of, but certainly something that we feel is right. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cavello. Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Ritholder.
Thank you, President Broussard. Yes, I've got to follow up with what Commissioner Cavello was talking about. In no way or shape or form, I hope this is taken that we're against the horse racing, and that is what this whole commission was started on. But on the other side, if I might tell my position, I'm sitting here as a jury, basically what it is. And all I have to go on is what the rules and regulations do say. And so, and they're tough. And I don't know if we start changing or compromising, then we need to rewrite the rules. But what we have in position right now, and it is, it is not a pleasant thing. I feel the pain. I'm in agriculture, and when you don't quite do it right, you are held to what you said you were supposed to do. So I guess I'm sorry you feel that the commissioners that voted for it are against horse racing. It couldn't be anything further from the truth. The Wyoming bred program is probably one of the best programs in the United States, and integrity is a lot of what makes it good. So, and I sure I did not feel good about having to vote for it, but that was how my position was. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Ritholder. Any other comments, questions?
President Broussard, we had a Mrs. Laura raise her hand. I've moved her over.
Mrs. Laura, you have a comment?
Thank you, commissioners. My name is Laura Tolliver Pearson. I've been elected to the Senate this last primary and general election. listening to this meeting, I'm just kind of disturbed. There were errors made on both sides of this matter, and that's not even being considered here. The people of Wyoming are looking for you and for us to protect their interests. And listening, and this is the first time I've ever been on one of these meetings, but I think this is really exposing that there's a problem here. And the commission needs to take all of these things into consideration. And so if it would have been me voting, I would have voted no, but just because there were errors on both sides and it needs to be fixed. So thank you for taking my testimony.
Thank you. Anybody want to make a comment? Commissioner Schiffer?
I have no comment.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Well, you know, this is a young program, and if we all agree that, you know, if the rules are wrong, then we need to make changes, but the rules are what they are now, and I think it's pretty cut and dry. If you want to participate in the program, it's your responsibility to assist our inspectors in finding the horses, so we don't waste our resources helping you get money out of the breed program. I'm sorry if that's how you feel. None of us want to eliminate or shrink the size of our horses in the program. That's the opposite. We just and there's a lot of them are simple mistakes that you'll never make again. We know that. It's an oversight. We get it, but it's a lot of money involved, and if it were a $50 fine, we probably wouldn't be here. I get it, but from my perspective, this is the rules we're working with, and I'm going to enforce the rules and support. I think our inspectors have integrity, and they've submitted this suspension the way it is, and it's unfolded the way they've seen it, and the horses were not in the location that were listed. So I'd like to ask if we can have a motion to uphold the suspension. We have a motion to uphold the suspension.
President Bessard,
Yep.
I think we already had a motion on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we?
We opened up the discussion.
Okay, sorry. So then, any more comments or questions?
President Bessard, Mr. Peterson has his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, sir. President Broussard, you just said the key words. I think that you said you have to uphold the rules and follow the rules as they're written, and people make mistakes. Okay, so therefore, where does your office have responsibility in the mistake they made, or in just the communication, or in the form of the letter, of how that letter is written? Because again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. What is a permanent domicile? And how much paperwork do you guys really want to change an address from 3 miles away to go to full for 4 days and come back? You just bombard your office with this change. We're going to change. Now we're going to change. Now we're going to change again. So that's like 3 changes a year, continual cycle, where again, I'm going to use the word common sense, is not hard. So you can fall back all you want to this letter of the law, but we're trying to make this program, we're trying to follow the rules and just make sure that these horses are protected and taken care of when they're going to foal. Again, if it was at a vet clinic, are you going to kick somebody out because they went to the vet clinic for 4 days and didn't change their domicile? So again, I ask you guys to think about what you're doing here and carefully. I know you said the word, get into the Wyoming bred point system. Yeah, a lot of us would like to run there. I was riding racehorses in Wyoming Downs like 2-3 decades ago. So I've been involved in Wyoming a long time. And it's not just like I'm coming in and not doing the things that I think are right. And I just asked the commission to consider all the facts in this case, including mistakes that could be corrected by your own office. That's not something that should be brushed aside. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. Commission legal staff, I see your hand up.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, I thank you. And I think while I understand all these points, but at the end of the day, the inspectors have an obligation. That obligation is written out within the rules. And, you know, if there, again, as it has been addressed by some of the commissions, if there needs to be adjustments, that's outside my purview. I believe that's outside the purview of the inspectors, which that's not what we're here to address. But what we're here to address is what the rules are as they are written. And in no other, I think it would be difficult, anyone testifying here today or raising that, to say that whether it's this agency or any other agency that unilaterally can decide what exceptions it wants to allow or not allow that aren't written in the rules. While I understand that, but at sometimes, and in addition to that, you know, these caretakers and members who are part of this business, there are certain standards and obligations which they incur and which they are put under as part of this program. And to dismiss those obligations and those standards, again, I don't think that goes with the spirit of the program either. And so just to address it more specifically, again, outside of my purview, we are here to enforce the rules as they are written, and the agents, they're doing their job to enforce the rules that are written. Certainly, I don't think anyone's here to undermine this program, to undermine the revenue that it generates for all the parties involved. But from my perspective, we have these rules. That's why we're here to enforce those rules. And if there are exceptions, typically those are exceptions that are written into law. And I just say that those aren't, that what I've heard here today are not exceptions under the law. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Senator Driscoll with a hand up. Senator, you have a comment, concern, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, and I'm kind of loath to visit. I've texted with a couple of you. Is there any flexibility in your rules to do fines rather than suspensions? I'm one that really hates to see us lose good horses and good participants and have bitterness out there. And it appears to me that there's some all the way around on what goes, and the rules, you know, we're young and we're changing them. And I truly believe in the power of the commission. I've kind of kept my hands out of anything you do, but we formed all this to race horses and get people in it and participate. And it appears to me there's a lot of effort being made to kind of try to follow the rules. I'd really get it if the horses went out of state, but where they stayed in and they don't get it, I guess I'm having a bit of a hard time tracking why you pull horses off the track when it's, yeah, without a doubt, it's an infraction. I get it and understand it, but it isn't one that was done intentionally or was done to hide anything. It was done kind of messing up. And having been in that world a lot in my life, I guess I'd like, if it's available, I think it'd be wise to fine and let them race and give them a probationary period or whatever than to actually take them off the track and potentially lose some really good racing people, it appears to me. And I don't know the background. That's why I hesitated. So I'll be quiet, and I thank you, and I abide and stand behind what you guys do. I feel for you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you, Senator. Nick, do you want to answer that question? Because I know the answer, but you're better.
Certainly, President Broussard, as the rule stands now, there is no ability to do anything other than the suspension. The rule says if a horse is moved without notifying, it shall be suspended for the remainder of this breeding season and the next. If that's something that you all want to consider moving forward, that would take a rule change, and we'd have to work with Mr. Kaler as far as how we can assess fines for violations. That would be something that we'd have to look at in the future, though.
I agree, and it's an all or nothing at the moment. And again, from the industry, from the folks, from the horse owners, the trainers, if there's input on what they think would be a way to make it, less painful for simple mistakes, I would be all for listening to proposed rules. But at the moment, we're working in the system we're in. And everybody who's in the system now knows the current rules, I'm assuming. So I like what you said, but that's for another day's conversation. So at this point, do we have any more comments or questions? Not seeing any. Director Laramundi, do you want to call the roll?
President Broussard,
Yes.
Vice President Cavello,
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson,
No.
Commissioner Bolt,
No.
Commissioner Schiffer,
No.
Commissioner Rithaler,
Yes.
Commissioner Kura,
Yes.
Commissioner Francisco is absent, and Commissioner Wildcat is also absent. President Broussard, that is 4 yes and 3 no.
Thank you, Nick. All right, we'll move on to item 3D. I have 10 o'clock. Does anyone need a 2-minute break or 5-minute break?
We're out.
I need to go home and see
President Broussard,
about this.
you'll give me just a minute here. I'm going to move a couple of people around here.
Okay. Well, everybody will have, we'll take
3 out of the 4 that's out.
I have 10:08. We'll just give Nick a couple minutes. If anybody needs a quick break, come back 10:11.
That's Paul Farrell, you know who she is. Been elected to the Senate. Laura Farrell. She's, her dad, Bill. Yeah.
What are you two doing, huh?
Nick, are you back?
President Broussard, I am.
Okay, thank you. We'll do a quick roll call in
President Broussard,
here.
Vice President Cavello,
Here.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Here.
Commissioner Bull,
Present.
Commissioner Schiffer,
Here.
Commissioner Rithaller.
Here.
Commissioner Kura.
Here.
Commissioner Francisco is absent, and Commissioner Wildcat is absent. President Broussard, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we will now proceed to item 3, Delta or D, request for an appeal from Carbon Kennington.
President Broussard, item 3D is a request for a Wyoming bred appeal from Carbon Kennington for 429 Digger, docket number 24-0180. For the commission, Special Agent Hotard will be the one testifying to this. I also wanted to let you know that I had received a small presentation from Mr. Kennington that he would like to share. So whenever you're ready for that, I can share that so you can all see that.
All right, thank you.
Also, President Broussard, Mr. Kennington would need to be sworn in. Mr. Hotard's oath would still be in effect.
Okay, let's start with swearing in Mr. Kennington, and then we'll go with the commission legal staff's opening and go from there. He can do his presentation right after. Is that fair with everyone? Okay, so let's swear in Mr. Kennington.
Mr. Kennington, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter before the commission, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would return it back to you and Mr. Marvel.
Thank you. Mr. Marvel, do you have some opening comments or statements?
No, Your Honor, other than as Mr. President and the commission is aware, Agent Hotard is here to testify in regards to his report as well as any communications. So at this point, we will waive any opening arguments, and then I'll obviously leave how you would like to proceed, whether that's through the presentation or Mr. Hotard's, Agent Hotard's testimony. I'll leave that in the discretion where it is appropriate with Mr. President and the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Hotard, your testimony is similar to the previous 4.
No, Mr. President, this is an
Okay.
entirely separate matter.
Okay, well, yeah, please. Oh, I'd like to let you start.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Agent Hotard, can you go ahead and what is your role with the commission?
I'm a special agent criminal investigator for the Wyoming Gaming Commission.
And members of the commission and Agent Hotard, I'm going to direct your attention to the Wyoming Gaming Commission officer report. I will be asking a few questions that was included in your packet. It is a 2-page document. Agent Hotard, do you have that document in front of you?
Yes.
And it appears that you did a preliminary investigation on October 28th, or excuse me, October 26th of 2024 in relationship to a mayor check. Can you describe briefly what you did or what occurred on October 26th, 2024 for the commission?
I was in the Star Valley area checking Wyoming bred mares on October 26th. And I went to, at about 1:05 p.m., I went to the address 400 Private Treaty Lane in Afton, Wyoming. That address was indicated on a form that our office provides agents who are in the field checking horses. That address, there was a single horse there by the name of 429 Digger. That horse was listed at 400 Private Treaty Drive, and that was my purpose for going there.
Okay, so, and to make sure we're clear, that 400 Private Treaty Lane, that was the address which was listed for where the horse would be located, correct?
Correct.
And did you verify that? Did you check that before going out? What did you do in that regards to verify that was the address that had been provided to the commission for the location of the horse?
Those forms are generated by our Wyoming bred registrar, Brandy Koltiska, off all the information that she compiles throughout the year. And then those lists are put together in a digestible form, I guess, if you want to put it that way, for the agents in the field. And so that information had been seen by Brandy, generated by Brandy Koltiska, our Wyoming bred registrar, and then also by Director Laramendi.
And so on October 26, 2024, you went to 400 Private Treaty Lane to identify or to locate 429 Digger, correct?
Yes.
And was 429 Digger at 400 Private Treaty Lane on October 26, 2024?
No, I could not locate that mare at that address.
And so following that, did you make any kind of phone call? Did you attempt to call anyone in relationship to that horse?
I had a phone number listed on once again, on the forms that were provided. The phone number listed was 307-248-0725. I called that phone number and I got a message that said the wireless customer is not available and there was no option for a voicemail. I knocked on the door of the residence. It didn't appear there was anybody home, but I knocked on the door of the residence and I got no answer.
And then according to your report, it looks like a registered letter was sent to Carbon Kennington, which was signed on November 8th, 2024. What was enclosed with that letter, if you recall?
As I recall, it was just the letter. I prepare the letters when I come back for the horses that I couldn't find for whatever area I was checking. I submit those to Randy Koltiska, our Wyoming bred registrar, and she goes through and confirms that all the information is correct and that the horse was supposed to be at that address. And then she mails the letters out from that point.
Okay, so for clarification, you get back, you go ahead and again double check and verify that that is the address at which the horse is supposed to be located, correct?
Yes.
And then at that point, you sent out this, when you refer to the letter, would that be the suspension letter? Is that what you're addressing?
Yes.
Okay. And members of the commission, there is included in there, and it's dated October 28th, 2024, suspension letter, what I'll refer to as a suspension letter. The actual title of that, or the heading of that, is Notice of Status Change Wyoming Bred Program. Agent Hotard, could you turn with me to that exhibit, or to that letter, please? And so this is the letter that you sent notifying of the suspension. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then once that letter had been sent out and had been received, did you receive any kind of communication from anyone involved regarding this particular horse?
Yes.
And briefly describe what you had received or what communication you had in relationship to Mr. Carbon Kennington.
At some point in time, and I'll have to look here quickly, looks like November 16th, I was included in an email. We received the email from, we being myself and Brandy Koltiska, received an email from Carbon Kennington, and that was once again on Saturday, November 16th. And it had some attachments, some pictures, and a short narrative. Did you want me to go through that?
No, and so you did receive some attachments, and did anything in the email indicate that this horse was in fact at 400 Private Treaty Lane the day of the inspection that you received from Mr. Kennington?
There was nothing to indicate that.
And then in response to that email or regarding that email, you created a map with 2 yellow pins on that. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
And members of the commission, there is an image in the packet that has, I guess, an overall map, and there are 2 yellow pins. I will be asking Agent Hotard regarding that particular map. So Agent Hotard, at the very top, what I will call the north end of the map, there appears to be an address listed as 400 Private Treaty Lane. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that yellow pin, for the benefit of the commission members, that yellow pin is where the actual address is. Is that something that you put on this map?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's a second yellow pin to the south where it said there's a title enclosure 3A. Do you see that, Agent?
Yes.
And what is, if you could, for the members of the commission, describe what that pin is for, what that signifies?
So the pin that's marked 3A was from one of the enclosures I received in the email on November 16th from Mr. Kennington. And in his email, he had also taken an overhead Google Earth snapshot and drawn a red arrow indicating where the horse was at. It's like a barn or a pasture. I created this map just as a means to familiarize myself with the area and with what Mr. Kennington, where he was telling us the horse was at compared to the 400 Treaty Lane address, Private Treaty Lane address.
And so the address, or the location of the horse, I should say, at enclosure 3A, that is a different location and a different address than 400 Private Treaty Lane, to your knowledge, correct?
Yes.
And so again, just for clarification, at this point in time, the horse was supposed to be, or according to the commission records, at 400 Private Treaty Lane. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was not there, correct?
Correct.
That is right now all the questions that I have, Mr. President, subject to any kind of rebuttal or anything. But thank you. If there's any questions from the members of the commission, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, if Mr. Kennington wants to present his presentation, you can do that.
Let me.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Kennington, do you just want me to let you share your screen and you can go through it?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love
Okay.
that.
You should be able to share now.
Okay. Is it working? I can't tell. Is it sharing right now? No. Yes.
Nope, does not appear so.
Let me try it again. Let's do that.
No pressure.
We'll see if it works. We'll see what happens. Might have to reopen real fast. Sorry about this.
No worries. Would it be easier if Director Laramundi did it and can you see Nick's screen at the moment? Nick, would that be easier or no?
I
Let
can
me
certainly share
try
my-
one more time.
Okay.
I adjusted some settings. Okay, it might be better if he did it because I'd have to have some. Anyway, yeah, go ahead and share it, and I'll just tell you when to switch. All right, here's my title page.
Okay.
Go ahead and click to the next slide. So as the investigator said, I received a notice of change status on November 8th is when I believe it showed up. Go ahead and click. This is what it looks like. And so there was a discrepancy in his testimony that he gave. He said he was here on October 26th, but on the letter I received, if you look real close there, it says October 23rd. And I can confirm that he did, well, I was called by an unknown number. I don't know if it was his number. I'm not sure, but according to this note, he showed up on October 23rd. Whether that's true or not, I would believe that my side is true just because I remember receiving a phone call during my instruction time while I was teaching my 3rd grade class, and I didn't answer because that's a little bit unprofessional. And I didn't call back because I received lots of unknown phone calls that aren't important. Okay, go ahead and click. The thing that jumped out to me the most in that letter, okay, was the suspension. Okay, so in the letter it says eligible for reaccreditation in the 2027 breeding season, deadline August 15th, 2027. So going off the rules that I was able to look up later, I found that the breeding season is from January 1st through December 31st. So that would mean the 2024 breeding season, this season. And I just barely put her in the program 2 months earlier than this. So I'm new and I, got some things to learn. And then it says through the end of the next season, which leads me to believe that next season would be 2025. And so wouldn't she be eligible for the 2026 season? Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've read there, that's what I understood from reading that, and I could be wrong. Again, I'm new and I don't know everything. So anyway, go ahead, click. Next slide. Upon further inspection, I thought, man, how did I miss this? How did I miss this set in stone rule, this really important one? I looked at the website. Here's a screenshot on November 8th. And it reads, once an accredited Wyoming broodmare is accredited by the state breed registrar, the horse shall be permanently domiciled within the borders of the state of Wyoming. A mare shall be accredited as a broodmare by August 15th of the year in which she has an eligible foal conceived. A mare may leave the state of Wyoming for breeding, medical, sale, or racing purposes without losing its accreditation, provided the mare returns to the state of Wyoming each year before August 15th. If an accredited Wyoming broodmare permanently moves out of state or fails to properly notify the state bred registrar when leaving, she will lose her accreditation and must be reaccredited to return to the program. If moving a mare within the state, you must contact the breed registry to identify a new location. In my mind, when I did move my mare, I, like Mrs. Mosman, I was only moving her for a few days and I didn't feel like it was a permanent change. So I didn't feel like I needed to file in. So then I didn't look at this form to the right. And right here, this is what it said on November 8th. It's since been changed. It says, if an accredited Wyoming broodmare or stallion moves from their certified location and their owner leasee fails to notify the state bred registrar 24 hours prior to movement, they will lose their accreditation and must be reaccredited to return to the program. So in that, it doesn't have a suspension period in there either. But I didn't look at this just because I didn't feel like she was moving permanently. I tried the link to look at the Wyoming bred rules. I got a bunch of racing rules. I believe that's been updated now. Well, it has been updated now to include all the rules that have been introduced. However, when I looked at it, when I did it this summer, or I don't believe I had those rules, had access to those rules. And I did try contacting Brandy, got her number from the Hillsteads in the spring, and tried calling. I don't know if that was their cell phone or an official phone or whatever, but didn't receive an answer. Had some questions then, but didn't get some answers then. So I don't feel like I had adequate resources to find the rules in order to follow them. But I do appreciate rules. I know that you guys got to run a tight ship, just like my classroom has to be. All right, click next slide. So I did move my mare, and it's because I doctored my colt all summer long at 400 Private Treaty Lane. I needed to wean him off of her. I needed better corrals because I didn't want him cut up again and have to do that all over again. So I did move him to where we routinely do our vet services. It's where we brand cows. It's where we preg check. So I moved them to better corrals. Wasn't quite sure how long I would leave them there, just because I didn't know how they'd react. And they were pretty turned up. So I decided to leave them there for a few days. And during that time, I also was buying another brood mare. And so I left her there for even more days to introduce her to the new brood mare. Go ahead and click on. I think you guys have discussed this, but I believe most of the broodmare rules have been instituted to make sure broodmares are actually in the state of Wyoming, contributing to the ag industry and economy of Wyoming. I can assure you that 429 Digger has never left the state of Wyoming since August 15th, 2024. Here's a little evidence to support that. Click. Well, first of all, I don't have any motive to ever move my horses out of Wyoming. Wyoming resident, third grade teacher, assistant girls wrestling coach. My parents, my grandparents are all Wyoming residents. My wife's parents and grandparents are all Wyoming residents. I bought my hay here in Star Valley, and I store it here in Star Valley. I sold my colt to my brother, and I haven't missed a single day in the last 2 years of teaching. Click. This is the story of 429 Digger, all the times I've moved her throughout the year. But I don't know if that's all super relevant for now. So I did, at that location on the highway, almost everyone has to pass it. Likely that the investigator probably saw her on the highway, but again, there's lots of horses here, so you might not have known who she was. But go ahead and click on. Here's just some pictures of my horses at that location. Some of the wounds I was dealing with, and oops. Oh, and so anyway, so that's throughout the summer. Just to let you know that she was in that location throughout the summer. Some of those dates are a little bit squashed, so you can't see them. This can be verified by my father, Gary Kennington, my neighbor, or our neighbor, Don Kundinger, that lives up the road, also Dr. Alan Carter. My brother's father-in-law is a Wyoming livestock investigator, Chris Strang. He can verify that I have sold my colt, and he's at my brother's house right now. Go forward. Here's some pictures here. So this is October 26th. This is when I brought my new mare back. I took a picture of her with my wife. Hard to see, but right here you can see the right hind limb of 429 Digger. My father has a red roan and a bay, and this is clearly not a red roan or a bay right here. So there's that. Shortly after I moved her back, oh, my dates are kind of squashed on here, but I believe it was October 29th is when I moved them back up to 400 Private Treaty Lane. Here's me riding in front of the house. You'd have to, I guess if no one was at our house, maybe if this is the location, maybe the investigator can verify that might be the house that he knocked on. I'm pretty sure my parents have never put up the 400 on the house. So anyway, all right, moving on. So here is probably a map you've kind of seen. So up here, the blue arrow is the location I had her at. We have probably 50 acres around the house that she could be on. As a family, we own over 400, maybe 500 acres in Star Valley. Anyway, that I could possibly move her to, but this is where she'll be most of the time, is at this location. Again, down here for vet work, in the red arrow. Depending on the system you use, this is the county system on the right. Screenshot of that. It's 1.4 miles. Other systems might say 2 miles or maybe a little less. So moving on. Here's a local vet. Some of you might know him. His name's Daniel Erickson. He works for the live horse racing as well. We call him Harv here in Star Valley. That's kind of a nickname his dad gave him. But here's an invoice from him verifying that he preg checked her. And you can see that from the dates of the text messages that I was trying to get him to come over all throughout October to come and preg check or do a Coggins for my colt. Anyway, he knows us well. He could verify that we don't have anywhere else to take our horses. Moving on. Here's an agreement I made with Rex and Debbie Saunders to buy their hay. Also text messages. You can click forward. Here's her current location. And now I don't have a building. This is a vacant lot in the town of Star Valley. The Star Hill is right there behind, kind of at the mouth of Swift Creek. So I don't have a location here, so I just listed the neighbor's location, but maybe that's not good enough. I don't know if that's close enough for my horse, but you'll have to clarify that for me as well. The resident here is Fawn Hemmert. She's a sister to our brand inspector, Ron Anderson. She's graceful enough to let me use some power for a tank heater and use some water from her house. You can click forward. I did notify the commission when I moved my mares over to the Afton location because it was a permanent move. Anyway, here's my summary here. 429 Digger, I don't believe should not be suspended from the Wyoming bred program because rules were either vague or unavailable, making the decision contrary to the Wyoming Gaming Commission statement to be fair. Anyway, Next point, if the commission still chooses to suspend her, according to the rules, she should be suspended from the program for the current season and the following season and be available to be reaccredited in 2026. If I'm reading things right. But I feel like I've provided substantial proof that 429 Digger has been in Wyoming, in the county, close to home. Further, click forward. I help out on a working ranch. I've gone to Wyoming schools. I went to Northwest College, wrestled there. I went to the University of Wyoming. I love Wyoming. I love the program that you've implemented here. Commend you for your efforts. However, I feel like, I think from watching the last conversations that you've had, I feel like there is a need for maybe some adjustments to some rules, which I don't know how that works with you guys, but for example, maybe like not a veterinary needed emergency, but on November 23rd, 2024, it was discovered that the tank for the well at the 87926 Highway 89 location had gone bad. We needed to move over 100 cows to a different location. I used my other mare, not 429 Digger, for the cattle drive. But under the current rules, she would be suspended from the Wyoming bred program if she was currently in, because I could not give 24 hours notice to the Wyoming Gaming Commission prior to us moving the cows. We routinely get calls to round up cattle on the range or off the highway, and we do not have 24 hours notice. The current rules for Wyoming bred program make it very difficult to take care of livestock, even though it may not necessarily be an emergency. Riding my brood mares means that I'm taking care of their feet. I've been to several farms here in Wyoming, not going to name them, but and premier ones. They haven't been taking care of their feet. They let go of those maintenance things that they don't do because they don't have to, because they're not going to use their brood mares like I'm hoping to use mine. And I think it's kind of a lack of livestock husbandry. This rule also encourages people to leave animals in one location year round, or mostly year round, which is not conducive to regenerative agriculture, like rotational grazing. It's good to rotate species to eliminate worms and all sorts of stuff. I have a animal science degree that I got at Northwest. So I would suggest that the rules be adapted to better suit Wyoming residents, while you closely monitor out-of-state owners who would have a motive to take their brood mares across state lines. I took the initiative to go look at some other programs and maybe see what their rules are. You can go ahead and click. And this is some rules that I found on the Louisiana bred program. Pretty premier program. I think it's maybe a little older than Wyoming's, but it has this whole section on out-of-state owners, and they do closely monitor every move of the broodmare just to make sure they're not getting moved out of the state lines. Now the Wyoming residents or the residents of the state maybe not monitored as closely just because they don't really have any motive, right? Anyway, so I guess I would love 429 Digger to be still in the program. However, I also believe in rules and regulations. And so if nothing else, I hope I can give you some ideas of maybe some rules that could change to benefit the Wyoming racing program. Because as it is right now, it would probably be more beneficial for me to take my mare and have her full in Idaho, and have that money from her be going to use somewhere else. that makes it difficult for me to keep track of her and to take care of her myself. But all Wyoming or all Idaho requires is that you pull in that state. So that would mean maybe taking some economic productivity and shifting it to Idaho because she's suspended for 3 years instead of what the rules state, 2 years. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nick, do you have any, you want to address the time on the suspension?
President Broussard, just a couple of quick things. As far as access to the rules are available on the website in actually multiple different locations. I can understand how some of it might be confusing because when you look at the parimutuel rules for the Wyoming bred program, it's under Chapter 8 of all of the parimutuel rules. So when you first click the link, it starts talking about licensing and live racing. And actually the Wyoming bred stuff is under the live racing rules section. But those are available on the website. And they've been available on the website for a very long time. One of the other things, and I think actually it was Mr. Pennington that brought it, after he had said, because he had talked about the forms changing, there was some additions to the form just to try to assist in making it much more clear. I think on the form that he had presented, it didn't explain or talk about the suspension period. So that was added just to make it very clear on the form that the suspension period is from the current breeding season through the end of the next season. And the other thing that was taken from that form was the estimated date of return. Just to not confuse people to where if they put an estimated date of return and then they forget to fill out the form, that way it makes it more clear that the form has to be filled out at every movement. As far as the breeding season, I would actually have to probably talk to Mr. Kaler about that. That's an interesting question for sure. And I will look into that here directly.
Thank you. So, I guess at this point we'll proceed with entertaining a motion to uphold the suspension.
Do you want to make clarification?
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes?
just a clarification on, if I may, just, I believe Mr. Kennington was correct. There is a slight disparity between the 23rd and 26th, but Agent Hotard does have an explanation for that as to which is the appropriate date. And so if I may just briefly ask him to address that for the commission, I would be very grateful.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, Commissioners, the check was actually completed on October 23rd, 2024. In my report, I put October 26th. Not sure why it says the 26th. Must have been a fat finger typo on my part, but it was during the week. I remember we were back in Casper by Friday. So, and I double checked, and October 23rd was a Wednesday. So that would have been correct. So there is a discrepancy, and it's my fault. It's my clerical typo. Something in my report, it says the 26th. That's incorrect. The check was actually done on the 23rd.
Thank you. Any more from commission staff, legal staff?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, I just have a quick question to the inspectors. So, trying to make phone calls and trying to track down the horse is not part of your obligation. I would guess it's something you're trying to help. Was there an option to leave a message on the cell phone, or did you say that you just got a message saying the phone was not available?
Mr. President, there was no option to leave a phone number. It's simply the message I got was the wireless customer is unavailable. I wrote that down in my field notes in parentheses. And if I may continue just a little bit, we make every effort. Due diligence dictates that we make every effort when we're in the field to try to contact the owners. Sometimes it's confusing because the phone number we have, it's unclear whether that's the owner or the pasture, the person who's pasturing the horse. But we make every effort when we're in the field to try to contact people to figure out what's going on, Mr. President. So.
Thank you. Mr. Torgensen or Commissioner Torgensen, I see your hand up. If you want to make a comment, please.
Yes, Mr. President, I guess that's a question that maybe to Nick. I guess I'm still confused. Is Mr. Kennington correct about when he should be able to have the mayor re-enrolled, or is it not until the 27?
President Broussard, Commissioner Torgerson. So I'm looking at the rule right now, and he's correct. It says that the suspension shall be for the remainder of the current breeding season through the end of the next breeding season, which would be the remainder of 2024, since the suspension took place in October, and then 2025. So that would, I think all of these, that would make it to where they would be able to reapply in January of 2026. With that being said, we're going to have to go back through several of these suspensions and adjust those that way.
That's a small victory. Mr. Torgensen, do you have another question, or your hand is?
I guess just a comment that I think what we're really seeing today is that we need to do a lot of clarification in our rules. No doubt about that. And something that Mr. Kennington said is, that some of these rules really make it impossible for a horse owner to have a using horse while using it in the breeding program.
Right. Well, I think we're a fair commission, and if we open up this particular set of rules for some input, I'm thinking we'll get a lot of good input from all sides, including the legal side and the owners. Yeah, it'd be great to have a little flexibility on. I mean, one size fits all rules aren't always the best, but that's what we have to deal with, and I'm apologizing for that. And Mr. Vice President, if you'd like to make a comment, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Mr. Kennington for his very, very good presentation. Obviously, pointing out some of the weaknesses in some of the rules that we have, and certainly pointing out maybe that we maybe need to treat I guess our resident horse owners a little bit differently, or consider that. And I'd like to thank him for all the work he's put into it, and certainly appreciate the time and effort.
Thank you. Yeah, personally, I kind of disagree with you, Cactus. I want all horse owners. We're registering the horse. I don't want to be unfair to a person who lives out of state. I'd like their horse to be in Wyoming also. I don't want to disincentivize somebody from New York or from wherever. But that's just my 2 cents. And I still love you, Cactus. All right, so moving on. At this point, I'd entertain a motion to uphold the suspension.
Mr. President, I shall move.
Thank you, Commissioner Kura.
Oh,
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Mr. President,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible in that motion to correct the suspension date to reflect that it'll run through 2025 and he'll be able to reapply in 2026? That way we can go ahead and correct it here.
Yes, most certainly. If that's what we've determined to be the correct suspension time, then I think we should have the correct suspension time. Nick, we don't have that in the other, we don't have it stated in our motion, but we can if you'd help us out with the proper motion and see if Commissioner Kerr would agree to that amendment.
President Broussard, so for this one, I believe the motion would be to amend the suspension to include the 2024 and 2025 breeding season, with the eligibility to reapply in January of 2026.
Thank you. Do we have a second for that motion?
Commissioner Schiffer seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Schiffer. So we'll now open up for more questions or comments if we regarding the motion. Yep, I see Commissioner Bowl trying to speak, and I see Commissioner Ritthaler trying to speak. So we'll go Commissioner Bowl first, if that's okay.
Your Honor and Commissioners, I'm going to again vote against this motion. I guess I just have a huge dislike for rules and regulations which set up traps and tripwires for good people. I mean, Mr. Kennington, he's the kind of guy we want raising horses for our racetracks. And he, in good faith, tried to comply with the regulation, and he came up short. And the notion of our commission seems to be that that means we have no choice but to affirm the suspension. And I disagree with that. I think the commission's role is to invoke substantial justice when the case merits it. And I do not see any justice in imposing this penalty in this case. There's been no evidence that that mayor ever left the state of Wyoming. No evidence whatsoever. And so we're taking a technical violation of the rules, and we're using a sledgehammer to make the point. And I'm not going to vote for that. And I understand that I'm on the losing end of this, but I want people to understand my view on that. So that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I think it was Commissioner Ritthaler. Did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you, President Broussard. Maybe not so much on this motion, but I think we need to go back and address all of the changes on the dates. Even though we did not make it in the other motions. So do we need another motion to go back and look at all the suspensions and make sure we are in the right time frame? And I think it should be a separate motion to accomplish that.
I think Nick is, if I'm not mistaken, Nick is going to revisit all of the cases prior that we may have.
But do we need a motion to put it on the records that that's where we're at? I guess.
I think we're gonna instruct the staff to go and give us the information we need. So when we come back, we have the full facts on who, and maybe if we need a motion at that point, we can have a special meeting or.
I guess I'm just was bothered. This motion had it and none of the others did. So in all being transparent and fair,
sure,
there's no reason to put it on this one and not all of them. That's what I was going with, Mr. President.
Perfect. Point taken. Thank you, Commissioner Ritthaler. I see a hand for the commission legal staff.
Yeah, Mr. President, yes, after we finish this item, it would be appropriate to do a blanket motion for items 3A, B, and C to amend those suspensions to run through 2025 with the reapplication in 2026. And we can do that after we finish up with this item.
Thank you.
So as far as the suspensions that weren't appealed, Nick, we probably have hundreds, I would guess. Is this something we're going to visit with the ones that had not appealed?
President Broussard, that is correct. We will go back through every suspension that was done this year. And we will send either amended notice of changes, and we'll get that corrected in the system to where it shows the correct date. My apologies. I don't know how that got overlooked.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
And I'm sorry, Mr. President, if I may.
Yeah.
In the next couple of days, I will put together kind of the history of this rule change, as well as notices and dates and times of all of the changes and when things were sent out. I know that this has been a topic for several years. In fact, I had just found a notice that was sent out on October 18th of 2019 in regards to these kind of movements. So I'll compile all that so you all have the entire history of what the purpose of this rule change was to begin with.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Director Laramundi. I see a hand from the commission legal staff. If you guys want to make a comment, you have the floor.
Mr. President, that was from the previous regarding the motions. I just don't think it came off. So
okay, that's good. Good news. Yeah. So I guess to Mr. Kennington, just quickly, you're fully aware that we have to do surprise visits, right?
Yeah, I'm aware. I just
yeah, and I'm not trying to I'm not a lawyer like Commissioner Bowl. I'm just trying to I want to make sure I understand your understanding of the system, and that the reason we have surprise visits and in actuality they could happen at any point in the time frame, that. And I guess for the folks who are out there listening, our inspectors can come anytime, and it's usually the time when you just feel that you don't need to be diligent about the process, and that's where my position is. It's a tough tough rules, but there's a lot at stake, a lot of money at stake, and I think the diligence of it from your perspective, just as long as you understand that, I just wanted to make sure you understood, how important that is to be diligent in that process. But if you say you are, then I guess moving forward.
Yeah. And I guess another part of what I would like clarified is maybe like how close do I need them to the location?
Yeah,
I don't know if you can speak more to that. Just
I don't think it says
if we're gonna be cutthroat here, then I want to be very clear,
Well, I guess this is not in the rule, I don't think, but if you were an inspector and you were in his shoes, how far would you look for a horse? I mean, I guess there's probably 100 horses in view of your location, and our whole point is to be fair to both the owners and our inspectors, so the process runs smoothly. And I mean, we can maybe clear up and clean up rules, but what do we say? Do we make a rule that it has to be within 50 feet of something? I don't know that.
Right. And I'm like I said, I barely put a horse in the program this fall, and I just don't know. I would love to have them ready for the inspector whenever they decide to show up, but I got to know, some places have hundreds of acres, some places have 5 acres, but for me, I just want to know like how close is or what's reasonable, and I feel like it's a fair question, and I'm not saying that she was at a reasonable distance. I'm just saying for future, because I have another mare that I would like to put in the program, but I would also not like to get suspended and whatnot again. So like how close is reasonable?
I don't know that answer, but I do know that I think the communication between yourself and our brood and Ms. Kopek, Randy, then is probably key to this. If you have an unanswered question, then ask the question by all means, because we're willing to answer questions.
And I have asked Brandy. I've sent her an email and I said, well, how close do I need? Some operations have hundreds of acres, some places even thousands. how close to the specified location do you need to be? And then she said, I'll compile your information, I'll send it to the commission. And so, and I'm not trying to be confrontational, I'm just asking.
No, you're not. It's fair, and I think it's all the questions are kind of showing that we may need to revisit some of the rules to be more accommodating, but we also want the integrity of the program to be without reproach. So, do we have any more concerns or questions before we call the vote?
President Broussard, Mr. Spiva has raised his hand.
Okay, George, is he able to talk?
He will be. Yeah, I'm moving him over right now.
Okay, George, if you hear me, you can make your comment. I'm assuming it's George.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Mr. President, just to answer Mr. Kennington's question, we do have a lot of properties that have thousands of acres. And when the folks are in the field to check those, you know, it's really hard for them to go over 1,000 acres to try to find a horse that's in a field. We do have, you know, certain criteria for things like that. And we try to work with the owners and get GPS photos of that. If that's the kind of situation that we run into, we'll ask the owner, you know, to go out in their field and get us a picture with the GPS attached to that within 24 hours so we can verify that that horse was there within that time frame. So there is things that we can work with. The biggest thing is just to make sure that, you know, they communicate with our office. So we know, you know, this year, I think we have 896 horses that we have to physically inspect over 96,000 square miles. And the guys put 40,000 miles on a vehicle looking for horses. So it definitely does help when we know where they're at.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Laramundi. Okay. I see Commissioner Ritholler, you'd like to make a comment? Oh, no, George Spiva. I see George. Go ahead, George. You have the floor.
President Broussard, commissioners, I believe the rule says that if a mayor is suspended, that mayor should be suspended and ineligible for the program for 2 years. If, in my mind, if they are only, in this case, only suspended for the 2025 and eligible to be reinstated in the 2026, that's only 1 year. In my opinion, if you're going to suspend a mayor for 2 years, they ought to be suspended for the 25 and the 2026 breeding season. And I think if you'll go back and look at the way it's been done, and essentially the breeding season is over for this year. So if you're going to suspend a mayor for 2 years, it ought to be 2025 and 2026. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Spiva. All right. So, any comment about that from the legal? I see Mr. Kennedy has his hand up, but from the commission legal staff, any comment on that?
Mr. President, the way that we've been treating all of these in the past, and the commission has been treating it as the current breeding season, or the year in which the suspension takes place, and then the full year next year. That's how the commission has been interpreting this rule. That's I believe how it was discussed in all of our public meetings and things like that. And so that would be consistent with the way that we've interpreted in the past, to be the remainder of 24 from October through the end of 24, and then all of 25 with eligibility for 26.
Okay, thank you. So we'll keep the motion as is, and if there's new information that arises, we'll address that and make corrections. Mr. Kennington, you wanted to make a comment. Please go ahead.
Oh, because she's bred this year, it would make this full ineligible, right? This 2025 full. And she'd be ineligible for the next year, so it would possibly make the next full ineligible. So that's 2 years, and I feel like with that would be 3 years anyway. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
President Broussard.
Yes, sir.
That is correct. That is because the 24 full in 25 and then the 25 full in 26. So it is 2 years. And actually, to Mr. Kennington's point, if we went through the breeding season of 27, it would be in 3. So we will get that corrected.
Okay, thank you. I see, Mr. Spiva, you have your hand up again. Is that a new hand?
Yes, President Broussard, commissioners, if the 24 foal is ineligible and the 25 year is the second year, I agree with Mr. Kennington, yes, that would be a 2-year suspension.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. All right. Any more questions, comments, concern regarding this item and this motion? Not seeing any. Nick, if you go ahead and make a roll call vote.
Mr. President, Commissioner.
Yes.
Let's review the motion that was given that I gave.
Sure.
For clarification.
Thank you. Nick, do you have that down? Oh, you're on mute. Nick, you're on mute.
President Broussard, the motion would be to amend the suspension to include the 24 and 25 breeding season and uphold that as amended.
Commissioner Kerr?
Sounds good to me. Let's go with that.
Okay, thank you.
President Broussard.
Yes.
President Cavello.
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson.
No.
Commissioner Bull.
No.
Commissioner Schiffer.
No.
Commissioner Rithaler.
Yes.
Commissioner Kura.
Yes.
Commissioner Francisco is absent and Commissioner Wildcat is absent. President Broussard, that is 4 yes and 3 no.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll move on to, does anyone need a break? I have 11:16. Commissioner Ridgeholler, you need a break?
No, I just was going to say, would Mr. President, would this be a good time to put up a motion that the rest of the suspensions that we upheld be also notified of exactly what dates we're talking about? And if so, I would make that motion.
If you'd like to, let's get guidance. Michael, do you have a suggestion for this motion?
Mr. President?
Yep.
The motion would be to correct all of the Wyoming bred suspensions that were issued in 2024, to have them run for the remainder of 24 and all of 25, with eligibility to reapply in 2026. And that would include all suspensions, whether or not they had been appealed or not. Sorry for the lengthy motion.
No, you got that? Would anyone like to make that motion?
I would make that motion, Mr. President.
Thank you,
I'll
Commissioner.
second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerr. Any comments or questions before we call a vote? Not seeing anyone in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
If anyone's opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Commissioner Ridgeholler. Moving on, does anyone need a 10-minute break?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I wonder if anyone else besides me would want to maybe consider, and I realize this is maybe big kind of backtrack, but with regards to the 4 suspensions that we levied today, would anybody besides me like to consider maybe looking at the suspension for only the 2024 season instead of the 25 season as well? I think they've all maybe brought forth some good points, and maybe this is a way of saying that we as a commission acknowledge that and can maybe back off of that a little bit.
Well, let's talk to Michael and Nick. Is that an option even? Or because the shall in our rules say shall?
Mr. President, unfortunately, looking at the rules, and I've gone through this many times, it is a shall. Often in statutes where you want to give that flexibility, you would need permissive language like may, or you would need some sort of exception like you have if somebody fails to run 16 race days where they can put forth good cause shown. And that's certainly something that the commission can consider when it does its rule revision, if it chooses to do so. But at this time, it's mandatory, and that's how the commission has treated prior suspensions as well.
I think we all agree with you, Cactus. I mean, this is a rough day for all of us, mostly for the owners. But Dan, you have a hand up. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, President Broussard. I would just say I would like that we include as an item on our January meeting agenda revision of this rule to make it less onerous, whether it's a fine or a slap on the hand or something. But I think this rule is not working for our constituency. So I would request it be made an agenda item for our January meeting. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
So
Can we also, Mr. President, instruct the staff to make sure that any suspensions that we did previously, like maybe back into 23, that to make sure that those suspensions would be eligible in 25?
Yes, I think we'll instruct the staff to review the suspensions of the past and prior years also to make sure we're being fair and following the rules. Yeah, I think everybody out here who's listening on this I think I saw 36 participants. Is that right, Nick? I mean, there's going to be some input. And our new director probably doesn't have a whole lot going on, so he can put that item on the next agenda.
Will do.
Hey, thanks, Nick.
President Broussard, and if you'd like, if you want to just wait for that agenda item, and then in the January packet, I'll have the history of this to kind of review it. That way you can see it in its totality.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Curl, in all of this issue that we're dealing with today, I know it's been tough on the owners of the horses, et cetera, but we have to give credit to our inspectors because they are doing, pardon the French, a hell of a job for the size of state that we have, that they have to travel around and look for these horses. So I think it does fall upon the owners and the caretakers to make sure they've got their ducks in a row, whether they're moving them 2 miles down the road or whatever. It's the way it's written until we get the rules changed or amended. But I wanted to.
I totally agree. So at this point, the rules being the rules, even we may or may not change them the way the owners want, or the trainers, but the rules are the rules now. So it's going forward, due diligence. So thank you for that. If there's no more under the item 3, we will carry on either with a 5-minute break or item 4. Raise your hand if you need a break. Got 1, 2. All right. 2's not a majority, but we'll come back at let's say 11:30 on the nose. And we'll visit item number 4.
What are you feeding yourself, Daniel?
Lunch.
Attaboy.
Peanut butter sandwich, of course.
You can't beat it. You can't beat it.
It's a little later where I am than for you.
Where are you at today?
I'm in South Carolina.
Well, good for you.
Dan, did you bring enough for everyone? That's the question.
I doubt it, and I think it may be colder here than it is where you are. So
Yeah, it's nice.
enjoy that warm weather over there.
It's going to change, I'm pretty sure.
It is raw here today.
Okay, I have 11:30 on the nose.
President Broussard, before we begin item number 4, is there anybody that feels the need to go into executive session? It would be executive session pursuant to 164405A9 to consider or receive any information classified as confidential by law. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions for Mr. Kaler prior to hearing this one. If not, we can continue on.
Well, I would ask Mr. Kaler a question. Do you have information you need to share with us that's of confidential nature?
Mr. President, here recently, we've been going ahead and putting executive session at the outset, just to make sure that the commission, if they did want to ask questions about the statutes upon which they're about to take action, if you have any questions, we can get that out of the way. That way we don't have to go in later during discussion. I personally don't have anything that I feel I need to bring to your attention. But we wanted to give you the opportunity if you had questions before we start receiving information on this matter.
Thank you. Do we have commissioners who would like to get information in a confidential setting?
Mr. President, Commissioner Kerr here.
Yes, sir.
With the new item coming up, I would like to have an update and kind of a little heads up in what we're going to be facing on this next issue regarding racing days, what have you, by each component. That's just my thought.
Okay. So, I guess, is that discussion better in public, or are there some things you think are of a confidential nature, Commissioner Curra?
I just think that we need to have our heads wrapped around what this will do to us if a situation may come up, such as Commissioner Schiffer brought to our point or our knowledge in regards to this. I hadn't thought of that before, but I think it's something that we should consider moving forward anyway.
Okay. Commissioner Schiffer, I see your hand. Do you have something?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd agree with Mr. Curra. I mean, I think there's some language in the statutes that we kind of need some advice on. So I would move that we go into executive session.
Thank you, Commissioner Schiffer. Apologize to those who are not invited, but Nick, would you bring us into executive session via Zoom?
President Broussard, so in order to do this executive session, I had sent another email to you with a separate link for a different meeting. You'll just need to leave this meeting and join that link for that executive session.
Okay.
And then once we're done with that, we will come back to this meeting link.
Thank you. So Commissioner Schiffer has a motion to go in executive session. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Curra, all in favor of going into executive session, state aye.
Aye.
If there's anyone opposed, say no. Okay, so is that link on the front of the packet?
President Broussard, no, it is not. It came in a separate email just a couple hours ago.
Oh, okay.
So if you just follow that link, it'll take you right to it.
All right, thank you. So Nick, you have your phone handy, so if we get lost in the ether somewhere, we'll call you and well, you'll notice we're not there, but
yeah,
we'll
get you in there.
All right, I'm exiting this meeting. Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Bull. Oh,
Yes.
hey, this is Mike Taylor. You'll need to log out of this one that you're on right
Okay.
now. Okay, just so that
Okay.
we don't, okay.
All right.